May 20th. Things have gotten really hairy around here. I've been so busy that I haven't had time to keep this journal every day. Everyone thinks that there's a big wind of change blowing, and when the storm passes, I want to remember every second of it. On May 13th, the students in Tiananmen Square changed their tactics. Up until then, thousands had refused to leave the square, and every day the place was a carpet of humanity. But on the 13th, 1,000 students started a hunger strike and vowed to keep it up until either they died or the government promised to meet with their representatives and begin reforms. When I heard that, I rushed down there. The students were set up in the center of the square, sitting or lying or spread on newspapers, surrounded by thousands more who were not hunger striking. The Daoji Bao, the big character posters, demanded that the Communist Party become more democratic and that the corruption and the high levels of the party be stopped. I spotted Hong and Lan among the strikers, but I couldn't get near enough to talk to them. Later, when asked Lao Zhu about the later when I asked Lao Zhu what this stuff was about, corruption was all that. Sorry. Later, when I asked Lao Zhu what this stuff about corruption was all about, he looked a little bit uncomfortable. He gave me a vague answer about a few bad men being dishonest. Eddie butted in as he usually does. Lao Zhu is giving you the party line, Alex. He doesn't want you to criticize the government. Lao Zhu looked even more embarrassed and laughed the way Chinese people do when they feel uncomfortable. Eddie shouldn't have censored him out like that, I thought. I let the matter drop until Lao Zhu had left. Then Eddie told me that the powerful men and women in the party got special treatment in everything, from buying foreign goods in special stores that only they could shop in, to housing, to special hospitals or special sections of already existing hospitals that had all the latest medical equipment. They made sure that their relatives and children got good jobs and privileges. They sent their kids to universities in Europe, Canada, and the States, all at a government expense. And they used government money to fatten themselves. Meanwhile, ordinary people stayed poor. I remember that Lao Zhu had told me that most of the powerful men in the party were Long March veterans. All of them, I asked? Are they all crooked? Eddie frowned. He didn't like being contradicted. They control everything, and they keep most of it for themselves, he summed up. Anyways, at least 1,000 students started the hunger strike, and a day or so later, 2,000 more joined them. Things in our office were pretty frantic. Eddie was going nuts, bossing everybody around, contradicting himself. He was supposed to be covering the upcoming visit of Premier Gorbachev, but he said he knew in his newsman's bones that the student demonstrations were the bigger story. Dad was loving every second of it, spending millions on taxis. He dashed off to tape the preparations for the state visit, then rushed back to see what was going on at the square. Lao Zhu seemed busiest of all. 1 minute translating stuff for Eddie, and then running down to meet Dad in the square, then being called back by Eddie on the two-way radio to do something for him. Eventually, he slept in the suite with us, which was against hotel regulations, but no one in the hotel seemed to be paying much attention to regulations. It seemed like everyone was having a holiday from regulations, me included. I tried to keep up with schoolwork, but I didn't get much done. I skipped school a lot. I went to the square at least twice a week to see what was going on, and sometimes I went with Dad. Eddie said that he figured that the students had started the hunger strike when they did to embarrass the government. He figured that their tactic was to force the government to give in to their demands because the government wouldn't want hunger strikes in Tiananmen Square when Premier Gorbachev arrived. It would look pretty bad when the premier came for the required tour of the square and the Forbidden City before going into the Great Hall of the People. 3,000 students were laid out on the pavement, starving to death. Dad mimicked tour leader's nasal voice. Here is the monument of the people of heroes, and there, just past the students who are starving themselves because they think they're such a bunch of old crooks, is Chairman Mao's memorial. When Gorbachev got here for his visit on the 15th, all the news reports showed him shaking hands with the Chinese government bigwigs. Everybody smiled so hard that I thought their faces would crack. Banquets. Visits to the Great Wall, more banquets. More smiles and handshakes and friendly talks while they sat in deep armchairs, big dollies on their arms, and interpreters sitting behind them. There was a whole lot of talk about the renewed friendship between the Russian and Chinese people after a 30-year break. I didn't see any Zhaoren, ordinary people, Russian or Chinese, on these broadcasts. As far as I could tell, were the Chinese people were in Tiananmen Square, and the Russian premier didn't get to visit the Forbidden City or the square because the students were still there, lying on the concrete, surrounded by their friends and classmates. Too bad, Gorby. On the second day of Gorbachev's visit, the ambulances started coming in Tiananmen Square. I was there. It was a hot, sunny morning, and the hunger strikers lay in rows on army-type cots under protective canopies. Some of them had even been refusing fluids and were so weak that they couldn't stand or sit. I tried to find Lan Hong, but it was hard to get closer and harder to see the faces of those lying down. But I kept searching. I must have been at it for over an hour before I found them. I hardly recognized Lan. She looked like a sick doll. Her eyes had sunk into her head, and she had sort of stared into nowhere. She was one of those who would not take another drink. Hong was on the cot beside her. He still had his red cap on, and when I called out to him, he got up on his elbow and smiled when he saw me. "Hello, Canadian friend," he said weakly. His lips were dry and cracked. "How are you today?" "How are you?" "We are in good spirits, although some of us are weak. More and more students are joining the hunger strike every day. Hong was interrupted by a voice blaring over the loudspeakers that the students had set up. "What was that all about?" I asked him over the noise. "More ambulances have come," he said. About 15 minutes later, 4 students took Lan away. As she was being carried through the crowd, a woman cried out and tried to clutch Lan's clothing, wailing as though someone had died. All I could make out was, "Please, please." Lan was lifted into the ambulance, and the others were helped in after her. Then the ambulance crept away, the horn braying as it slowly moved through the crowd. Hong stayed on his cot, staring up at the canopy above him. I figured that he had one more day until an ambulance took him away, too. I said goodbye to him and flashed me a victory sign. Back at the hotel that night, I thought a lot about what Hong and Lan are doing. Can't decide whether they are really brave or really dumb. What I am sure of is that it's dangerous. And I guess that's why I admire them so much. Once the premier had gone, things started to happen fast. 2 of the mega powerful boys, Li Peng, who is the premier, and Lao Jinyang, the chairman of the Communist Party, visited some of the hunger strikers who had been taken to the hospital. That was shown on TV also. Li Peng, with his round, smiling face and dark-rimmed glasses, was shown going from bed to bed, shaking hands with the students and talking to them. He looked about as sincere as a used car salesman. On Friday morning, before the dawn, the phone rang. I heard Lao Zhu answer it and start yelling into the receiver. Then he shouted, "Wake up! There's a rumor about Zhao Yingzhang was going to Tiananmen Square to talk to the students." We were all up and dressed in moments. "Let's go," Eddie said. I grabbed my backpack. No one seemed to notice that I went right along with them. The tall light standards in the square and the lights from the monuments make it easy to see where you're going, although you need extra lights for the TV pictures. It took us at least half an hour to push through the throng of the monument to the Monument of People's Heroes, which is where Eddie figured that the action would be. Buses were parked in the square somehow and commandeered by the students for the shelter. When it rained, it was cold out. It was cold out and a lot of people had coats on. Nothing was happening at the monument. Eddie said to Dad, "Let's split up and call on the 2-way if we see anything." "Okay," Dad answered. "I'll go towards Tiananmen. That's the front gate." "I'll cover the Mausoleum," Eddie said. "Lao Zhu, let's go." "Alex, you can come with me," Dad said. "Why don't I just stay here? That way we can cover 3 areas at once." "I don't know, Alex. I don't want you to get lost." What a lame thing to say, I thought. Eddie must have agreed. "Are you kidding, Ted? Your kid knows this city better than most of the residents." Dad agreed reluctantly, and the 3 of them waded into the crowd. I went up to the base of the monument among 100 or so students and tried to get a look around. The first tier of the tall building still had a lot of reefs on it. Nothing unusual seemed to be happening, other than probably 500,000 people, tents, parked buses, voices yelling over loud hailers, TV lights sparkling up for a few minutes and then fading. I fished my camcorder out of my pack. It would be worthwhile to try taping anything that happened. Then I checked my radio to make sure that it was on channel 1 and that it was on receive mode. I put it in my breast pocket. I stood around for a while, fighting off the chill, before I noticed something going on over at the Great Hall of the People. A blaze of lights had come on, like a cluster of white torches. Something was up. The lights began to move towards me, so I decided to stay put. I took out my radio and keyed it. Dad, Eddie, this is Alex. Can you see the lights in the northwest quadrant moving towards me? Over. Alex, Dad here. I can't see them on the south side of Kianmen. The smell of Kentucky chicken is driving me nuts. Over. And I can't see anything, was Eddie's response. I'll check it out and I'll let you know. Over and out. I put the radio in my pocket and the lights were moving towards me quickly. They were TV lights and somebody important was coming. Right near the monument was a bus, and when Zhao Jingyang got to the bus, he stopped. He was at the center of a tight circle of students wearing the white headbands that said Democracy Now! In Chinese. He reached up and started shaking their hands with the students in the bus. Amazing. This guy was the second most powerful man in China. By the time that I was making my way towards him, I had to climb down from the monument space, so I lost sight of Zhao. But the lights were easy to home in on. What wasn't easy was pushing through the crowd. Then I got an idea. I took off my hat, stuffed it in my pocket so my blonde hair would show. Press, press, I shouted, and held up my camcorder so high that it could be seen. Press, let me through, please. It worked. The crowd of students parted and I got to the bus in time to see that Zhao was talking. He was a medium height and a high forehead in the Western-style glasses. I put the camcorder to my eye and zoomed in on to get a medium close-up of Zhao with the students at the bus windows in the background. Even though the viewfinder, I could see that he was crying as he spoke to the crowd. The only thing from his speech I understood were too late. I probably don't need to write down how delirious happy Dad and Eddie were when I hooked my camcorder up to our office TV and showed them the tape. I thought Eddie was going to carry me around the room. Within an hour, Dad had found someone in the hotel who agreed to take the tape to the satellite feed station. And Eddie had written a report and faxed it to Toronto. I was delirious myself. The reporter's bug had really bitten me. We all wanted to go back to sleep but couldn't. Too much to do. I skipped school again. Dad went back to the square with Eddie and Lao Zhu to try and interview some of the students about Zhao's visit and ask them about what they thought it meant to their movement. I got to clean up the office because Eddie wouldn't allow anyone from the hotel in. Pretty demeaning job for someone who got this video report on national TV, if you ask me. It took me all morning to tidy up the office. It's hard to make an office neat when you know that the people who work in it are used to a mess, and that if they ever came back to find an orderly, properly messed, they'd think that they were in the wrong office. I also made sure that all the battery chargers were full and charging away. After lunch, Lao Zhu came by and started using the phone as he often did. He tried to catch people after the customary afternoon nap, but before the lines got too busy again. He was shouting away for an hour, saying, oui, about once a second, and then he sat down and made some notes. Eddie and Dad came back later in the afternoon looking tired. Dad put away his camera in an aluminum case and flopped into one of the armchairs. Eddie said hello and headed for the shower with his pipe still in his mouth. Just as Eddie padded into the office wearing a towel around his large middle, drying his hair with another towel. Just as Eddie padded into the office wearing a towel around his large middle and drying his hair with another towel, the phone rang. Lao Zhu answered it, yelled for a few seconds, listened some more, and hung up and looking glum. There is a rumor that Chairman Zhao Yingjiang has been removed from office, he said quietly. And my friend says that we should turn on the TV. I pushed the button, and the screen came to life. We gathered around. That's Li Peng, Lao Zhu said. The premier was talking, and he looked stern and even angry, but he had a look to his face that seemed to say, I'm the boss now. What's up, Lao Zhu asked Dad. Lao Zhu kept his eyes on the screen. Please wait, Ted. So the three of us stared at Li Peng, pressed in dark blue Mao suit, collar buttoned up under his chin, chopping the air with his hand. Karate style as he talked. I could make out a couple of words like China and student and foreigner, and then it was over. Dad and Eddie and I turned to Lao Zhu, and we knew from the look on his face that the news was not good. He spoke in a low voice as if he couldn't quite believe his own words. Premier Li Beng says that Beijing is now under martial law. Uh-oh, Dad said. Eddie let out a low whistle, puffing out his mustache. Lao Zhu continued. He has ordered all students and others to clear Tiananmen Square or face the consequences. Their presence is illegal. All demonstrations are illegal. It is also illegal to spread rumors, and, Lao Zhu added, looking directly into Eddie's eyes, foreign correspondents are forbidden to report on anything to do with the students' presence in Tiananmen Square. If they disobey, measures will be taken. I knew what martial law meant. It meant that all the laws were suspended. Even the Constitution and the government made policy directly using military to carry it out. Martial law meant that soldiers on the streets, corners with guns, searches of persons and houses without any kind of warrant, by soldiers, not police. It meant curfews and fear mixed with excitement, which is what I was starting to feel. But a couple of things I didn't understand. What's this stuff about rumors? I asked Lao Zhu. It means, Eddie cut him off. Remember what I told you about the government here controls and manages the news, Alex? I nodded, a little put out that he was answering for Lao Zhu. Well, the government will now tell more lies to the people than ever, and withholding more information than ever. If people start circulating the truth, they are accused of spreading rumors and are arrested. It's a way of controlling information. I looked at Lao Zhu. He sat there with a glum look on his face and nodded without saying anything. What will happen now? I asked. In unison, Eddie and Lao Zhu shrugged. Lao Zhu, can you still work for Dad and Eddie? I wanted to know. I mean, this won't make things more difficult for you. Lao Zhu smiled. I can continue, he answered, for the time being, because I have not yet told anything different by my leader. I stood at the office window, looking at the crowd streaming along the Chang'an Avenue. Martial law, I thought. That's what Zhao must have meant when he said, it's too late.